She slipped right into his bath. The billionaire vet caught more than just her hand. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The rain was relentless that night, soaking every street corner of Seattle until the city shimmered beneath the streetlights. Inside a small animal shelter on 8th Avenue, Nora Hayes wrapped a shivering gray cat in a towel. She whispered softly, "You're safe now, little one." But the power had gone out again, and the heater had failed hours ago. The shelter was freezing. The cat trembled in her arms, its fur matted with cold rainwater. When another thunderclap shook the windows, Nora made a decision. She grabbed her raincoat, held the cat close to her chest, and dashed into the storm, searching for light. Across the street, she spotted a large modern house, with its porch light still on. She assumed it was an empty vacation rental, a place where she could dry the cat just for a minute. Her hands were numb when she pushed the unlocked door open. Steam drifted from the hallway, carrying the scent of cedar and soap. She followed the warmth, thinking it might lead to a laundry room or heater vent. But as she stepped into the bathroom, her boots slipped on the marble floor. The next second, she fell forward straight into a deep bathtub filled with warm water. A startled voice broke the silence. "What the hell?" Nora gasped, blinking through the fog. A tall man stood half-turned toward her, shirt clinging wet to his chest, dark hair dripping from his temples. He looked more stunned than angry. I am so sorry," she stammered, clutching the cat against her. "I thought this house was empty. I just needed somewhere warm for him." The man's eyes softened when he saw the trembling animal. He knelt down, his voice calm but firm. "You could have frozen out there." He reached for a towel, wrapping it gently around both of them. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Only the sound of rain on the glass and the cat's weak meow filled the room. "Thank you," she whispered, shivering. "I will leave right now." He shook his head. "Not until you and your friend are dry." As she looked up, the light caught his face, the kind of face that carried quiet authority and a strange kindness. She had no idea that the man she had just fallen into, literally, was Doctor Logan Pierce, one of the most famous veterinarians in the country, and the billionaire owner of Pet Vita clinics. At that moment, he was just a man offering warmth to a stranger. And for reasons neither of them understood, that single accident would change everything. The storm passed by dawn, leaving the world washed in silver light. Nora woke up on a couch she did not remember falling asleep on. The cat, now dry, fed, and purring, was curled beside her. For a moment, she thought it had all been a dream. Then she noticed the folded blanket over her shoulders and the faint smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Dr. Logan Pierce was standing there, dressed in jeans and a gray sweater, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. He looked far less intimidating than he had the night before. "Good morning," he said, his tone warm but reserved. "You fainted after I gave the cat some food. It was a long night." Nora sat up quickly, embarrassed. "I am so sorry. I should not have stayed. I really thought this place was empty." He smiled slightly. "You thought wrong, but I am not angry. Your friend there needed help." He nodded at the cat. "She is a little underweight, but she will be fine." Nora blinked. "You know that just by looking?" "I am a veterinarian," he replied, handing her the second mug. "Logan Pierce." Her eyes widened. "You are a vet? That explains the first aid kit and the oxygen tank in the corner." He chuckled. "Occupational hazard. I bring work home sometimes." For the first time since the rain, Nora relaxed. She told him about Evergreen Shelter, about the dozens of stray animals that needed food and care. He listened, without interrupting, only asking quiet, thoughtful questions. When she mentioned the shelter's power bill overdue notice, she quickly tried to change the subject, but he caught the flicker of worry in her voice. "Shelter work sounds hard," he said. "Why do you keep doing it?" "Because if I stop," she answered softly, "no one else will." Something in her voice made him pause. It was not pity that he felt. It was recognition. He had built a company that cared for thousands of pets, yet somehow he had forgotten what compassion looked like up close. Before she left, she searched her bag for her necklace, a small silver piece engraved with the words Milo's Promise, but it was gone. She must have dropped it somewhere in the chaos. She waved goodbye, promising to repay his kindness somehow. Logan watched her walk away through the misty morning, holding the rescued cat close to her chest. When the door closed, he noticed the tiny glint of silver on the kitchen counter. The necklace. He picked it up gently, tracing the inscription with his thumb. Milo's promise. He wondered who Milo had been. Later that day, he drove downtown to his main clinic. His staff greeted him as Doctor Pierce, a title that felt heavier than usual. Meetings, sponsorship requests, endless paperwork, all part of his billionaire routine. But his thoughts kept drifting back to the soaked girl with the stubborn smile. That evening, he searched online and found the shelter's website. It was basic, made with an outdated template, but the message on the homepage stopped him cold. Every life deserves a second chance, even the forgotten ones. He clicked through the photos. There she was, Nora, kneeling beside a litter of puppies, hair tied messily, face glowing with quiet joy. Logan leaned back in his chair. Something stirred inside him, something long buried under years of success and control. He remembered the night she fell into his bath, terrified yet still protecting the cat first. That kind of instinct could not be faked. At midnight, he picked up the necklace again. Under the desk lamp, the engraving gleamed softly. He whispered the words to himself. Milo's promise. Then he opened his laptop and began typing an anonymous email to the shelter's director. To whom it may concern, Pet Vita Foundation would like to discuss potential funding for Evergreen Shelter. Let us schedule a visit this week. He hesitated for a long moment before hitting send. Meanwhile, across town, Nora was back in her small apartment, drying her wet shoes near the radiator. She smiled at the sleeping cat and whispered, "Looks like you found yourself a miracle, huh?" She had no idea that the man who had offered her warmth that night was about to change her life in ways she could not imagine. Outside, the city lights flickered against the clouds. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again soft, lingering like a reminder that fate was not done with them yet. A week later, Nora was at the shelter sorting through a new pile of donations blankets, canned food, and one broken heater. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and rain-soaked fur. She had barely slept in days. The storm had damaged part of the roof, and volunteers were scarce. Still, she kept smiling at every animal, speaking to them as if they could understand every word. She was on her knees mending a torn dog bed when a sleek black car pulled up outside. For a place like Evergreen Shelter, that kind of car was a rare sight. A man in a tailored coat stepped out, carrying a brown paper bag. She stood quickly, brushing off dust from her jeans. "Good morning," the man said with a polite nod. "I am looking for Nora Hayes." "That is me," she replied cautiously. "How can I help you?" He smiled. "I am delivering this from a Mr. Logan Pierce. He said you might need it." She frowned, taking the bag. Inside were supplies, bottles of disinfectant, medical gauze, gloves, even a portable heating lamp. Everything she had mentioned during their conversation at his house. Nora looked up, stunned. Did he say why he sent this? "Only that he hopes it helps," the man said, handing her a business card before leaving. It read Pet Vita Foundation, Community Outreach Division. Nora exhaled, touched but slightly unsettled. Why would a billionaire vet care about a small shelter on the edge of town? That evening, when the volunteers had left, she sat alone in the office. The rescued gray cat now purred on her lap. She whispered, "He did not forget you, little one. Maybe kindness really travels." Across town, Logan sat in his penthouse office overlooking the city. His assistant stood at the door, holding a folder. "Dr. Pierce, the Evergreen Shelter donation was processed. Should I send another batch next month?" He nodded. "Yes, and I will deliver the next one myself." 2 days later, he did. When Nora saw him walk through the door with boxes of medicine and food, she almost dropped the clipboard in her hands. "You," she said, half smiling, half surprised. "You could have just called." "I thought I would see the place that keeps me up at night," he answered. She laughed softly. "You lose sleep over stray cats?" "Only the ones that come with brave rescuers." His gentle humor broke the tension. He spent the entire afternoon helping her feed the dogs, clean cages, and repair a fence post. He even let a puppy chew on his shoelaces. While they worked, he noticed the walls were covered with photos of adopted animals, each labeled with a name and date. There was love in every frame. "You built all this," he said quietly. "We built it," she corrected, wiping her hands. "It takes a lot of people who still believe small things matter." He nodded, genuinely moved. "You remind me why I started my first clinic. Back then, I just wanted to save one dog. Somewhere along the line, I started chasing numbers instead." As the sun dipped below the horizon, they stood outside, watching the animals settle. The wind carried the faint smell of hay and soap. Nora turned to him. "You know, you do not have to help. There are plenty of other shelters with better publicity. I am not here for publicity, he said. I am here because you are. Her breath caught for a second, unsure how to answer. But before she could speak, her phone buzzed. The shelter's landlord was demanding the overdue rent again. Her face fell. Bad news? He asked gently. Just life, she murmured. We might lose this place next month. He wanted to help, but something stopped him. Pride flickered in her eyes. She had built this from nothing. Offering money directly might hurt more than help. So instead he said, let me host a small adoption event here next weekend. My company will sponsor it. We can raise awareness, maybe some funds too. She hesitated, then nodded. If it helps the animals, yes. When he left that evening, she noticed something on the counter, a small envelope with her name on it. Inside was her silver necklace, perfectly polished. A note was attached. You left this behind. I kept it safe. Milo would be proud. Nora stared at the words, her heart twisting. She fastened the necklace around her neck again. The metal was cool, grounding, like a reminder that miracles sometimes came disguised as accidents. From that night on, Logan visited the shelter every week. Together they cleaned, planned, and laughed, more than either of them expected. The animals seemed to sense it too, calmer, lighter, as if their humans had found something worth keeping. Neither of them called it love yet, but it was already there, quiet and patient, growing between the cages and the scent of rain-soaked fur. The following weekend arrived with clear skies and a light breeze that carried the smell of fresh-cut grass. Evergreen Shelter had never looked so alive. Bright banners fluttered at the gate. Tables were lined with adoption forms, and the animals wagged their tails or meowed from clean pens. Nora had been up since dawn, making sure everything was perfect. By mid-morning, cars began to arrive. Families, students, and local reporters gathered, drawn by the sign that read Pet Vita Adoption Day. Every life deserves a second chance. For Nora, it felt like a dream. The shelter that had once been forgotten now buzzed with laughter and music. Logan appeared just before noon, dressed simply in a light blue shirt and jeans, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He did not come with an entourage or photographers. He came alone, carrying a box of small treats for the animals. Nora greeted him with a genuine smile. You actually showed up, she teased. He grinned. I said I would. Besides, I wanted to see how many hearts you would rescue today. Hopefully all of them, she said, glancing around at the crowd. Throughout the day, they worked side by side. Logan helped children hold puppies for pictures, wiped muddy paw prints off tables, and handed out free collars. When the local news crew asked for an interview, he gently nudged Nora forward. You started this, he whispered. They should hear from you. She spoke nervously at first, then with growing confidence. This shelter was built by people who still believe compassion is not weakness, she said into the microphone. Every animal here has a story. All they need is someone willing to listen. Applause followed, and Logan watched her with quiet admiration. He had stood on hundreds of stages before, but none had felt as meaningful as watching her speak with that kind of honesty. By sunset, 27 animals had found new homes. Nora could barely hold back tears as she hugged each adopter. Logan stayed until the very end, helping her clean the empty cages. When the last volunteer left, they stood alone in the quiet shelter. It worked, she whispered, leaning against the doorframe. We did it. No, he said softly. You did it. I just followed your lead. She smiled, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. You are not very good at taking credit, are you? I am better at giving it, he replied. For a long moment, silence filled the space between them, comfortable, unspoken. The sound of crickets mixed with the distant hum of the highway. Then Nora's phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from the landlord. Rent increase. Effective next month. Her smile faded. The adoption event had helped, but not enough to cover the new costs. Logan noticed the change in her face. What is it? She hesitated. Nothing I cannot handle. But he knew better. Let me help, he said gently. She shook her head. You already have. I do not want charity, Logan. It would not be charity, he said. It would be an investment in kindness. Nora looked at him, torn between pride and gratitude. You sound like you are trying to buy redemption. Maybe I am, he admitted quietly. I spent years saving animals and forgetting the people who loved them. You reminded me why I started all this. Her expression softened, but she still turned away. I just need time to figure things out, he nodded, respecting the distance. Then take all the time you need. I will still be here. When she finally looked back, he was standing in the fading light, his face calm, his hands in his pockets. The golden glow of evening made the shelter look like a place reborn. As he left, he glanced at the adoption banner fluttering above the gate. The wind tugged it upward, revealing the small words printed at the bottom in Nora's handwriting. Hope has 4 paws and a heartbeat. He smiled to himself, whispering under his breath, "So does love." Neither of them knew it yet, but the next chapter of their story was already waiting, hidden behind a truth that would soon change everything they thought they knew about each other. The following week, the city was covered in a soft drizzle again, the kind of weather that made everything look half asleep. Nora sat at her small desk in the shelter office, reading the latest email from Pet Vita Foundation. They wanted to arrange a follow-up meeting about long-term sponsorships. She smiled faintly, grateful yet cautious. Nothing in her life had ever come easy, and she had learned to be careful with good news. Outside, the shelter buzzed with life. The newly adopted animals had left a quiet happiness behind. For the first time in months, there was space to breathe. Nora walked through the corridors, petting each remaining dog and cat, whispering their names like promises. Late in the afternoon, the sound of tires crunching gravel made her look up. Logan's black truck pulled into the lot. He stepped out carrying a folder and a cardboard box. His usual confidence was there, but there was something else too, an unease she could not place. "You came back?" she said, smiling. "I told you I would," he replied, handing her the folder. "These are the details for a partnership plan. It would cover your rent and utility bills for the next year. All official, no charity." She flipped through the papers, impressed. "This is incredible, Logan. I do not even know what to say." "Just say yes," he said with a small grin. But before she could answer, her phone rang. She stepped aside to answer it. It was a local reporter asking for a comment about the adoption event. Nora agreed to meet at a cafe the next morning, unaware of what was about to unfold. The next day, the cafe was busy, full of chatter and the smell of roasted coffee. The reporter greeted her politely but soon showed her something on a tablet. A headline flashed on the screen. "Billionaire Vet's Secret Donation Network. Is he using charities for public image?" Nora's stomach tightened. The article accused Logan of using small shelters to boost his company's reputation before a public stock launch. Her mind spun. Was that why he had helped her? She left the cafe in silence, her heart pounding. That evening, she confronted him at the shelter. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Was this all part of some business plan?" Logan's eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" "There are articles everywhere," she said, holding up her phone. "They say you are using us for publicity, that your foundation only funds shelters that make your company look good. Did you know about this?" He exhaled slowly. "Yes, I saw it. But it is not what you think. That report was leaked by one of my board members. They want to force me to focus on profits, not charity." "Then why did you not tell me?" she demanded. "Because I wanted to protect you," he said quietly. "I knew it would drag you into a storm you did not deserve." Her voice cracked. "You already dragged me into it, Logan. I believed in you." He stepped closer, but she took a step back. The air between them was heavy with hurt. "Nora," he said, his voice breaking, "everything I have done for this shelter, for you, was real. I do not care about the board or the investors. I care about you." But she was shaking her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "You have too many worlds, Logan. I do not fit in any of them." She turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the dim light of the shelter's hallway. The sound of rain began again, tapping against the metal roof like a heartbeat fading into distance. When she reached her car, she looked back through the windshield. He was still there, motionless, watching her go. Inside his pocket, he held something tightly, the small silver necklace she had once lost. He whispered to himself, "I promised I would keep it safe. I just did not realize I would lose her instead." Outside, the rain poured harder, washing the city clean while leaving both of them marked by what could have been. Neither of them knew it yet, but this storm was only clearing the path for the truth that would soon bring them back together. Days passed with a heavy silence that wrapped around the shelter like fog. Nora threw herself into work, cleaning, feeding, fixing, doing anything that kept her mind from drifting back to Logan. The scandal about Pet Vita filled social media feeds and morning news shows. Commentators argued, investors panicked, and shelters across the state wondered whether the donations would stop. But none of that mattered to her as much as the ache that settled in her chest. She had trusted him, and she had been wrong. Or at least that was what she told herself every time she replayed their last conversation. One evening, as she was locking the front gate, a young volunteer ran up to her holding a piece of mail. "This came for you, Miss Hayes." It was hand-delivered. The envelope was plain, sealed with the logo of Pet Vita Foundation. Inside was a short note in Logan's handwriting. Nora, they suspended me from the board. They think compassion is bad business. I will fix this, I promise. Please do not let the shelter suffer because of me. Folded with the note was a receipt of a large anonymous transfer, enough money to keep Evergreen Shelter open for 6 months. She stared at it, torn between gratitude and pain. For days she avoided replying, but late one night, while checking on the animals, she saw the gray cat, the same one from the storm, curled on the windowsill, looking out into the rain. The sight pulled something deep inside her. She remembered his words, "I am here because you are." The next morning, she made a decision. She drove across town to Pet Vita headquarters, a glass building that looked colder than she remembered. Reporters crowded near the entrance, shouting questions about Logan Pierce and the charity scandal. Nora kept her head down and slipped through a side door. She found him in his office, standing by the window, staring at the skyline. He looked exhausted, like a man who had been fighting battles no one could see. "Why are you here?" he asked quietly. "Because I wanted to hear the truth from you," she said. "Not from the headlines." He turned, his expression softening. "The truth is simple. I tried to run my foundation with my heart, not my wallet. The board wanted image control. They said kindness does not sell. When I refused to play their game, they leaked the story. Why did you not defend yourself publicly? Because the moment I do, it will drag you and your shelter into it. I will not let them use you as ammunition." Nora's anger began to dissolve. "You could have told me that before. I was afraid you would see me as another man hiding behind excuses." She sighed, looking down at her hands. "You are still hiding, Logan, but maybe you are hiding for the right reasons." He smiled faintly. "That is the kindest thing anyone has said to me in months." They stood there in silence for a moment. The sound of the city faded into the background, replaced by the hum of rain against glass. "I cannot promise the foundation will survive this," he said, "but I can promise the shelter will." "How?" she asked. He walked to his desk and handed her a folder. Inside was a deed and a new registration form. "It is yours now, independent, no corporate ties. I transferred ownership of the building and funding to you before the suspension took effect." Nora's breath caught. "Logan, this is—" "Do not thank me," he interrupted gently. "You kept your promise to Milo. Now it is my turn to keep mine." She could not speak. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at the man who had risked everything for what was right. As she left his office, she turned once more toward him. "You always find a way to rescue others," she said softly. "Maybe one day someone will rescue you too." He gave her a tired but genuine smile. "Maybe someone already did." Outside, the rain began to clear, sunlight breaking through the clouds. It felt like the world itself was exhaling, ready for a new beginning neither of them could yet name. Weeks passed, and the chaos around Pet Vita slowly began to fade from the news cycle. Other scandals took its place, and the world moved on, as it always did. But for Nora, and the small shelter that had once been hanging by a thread, everything had changed. The new deed and funding made Evergreen truly hers, and the sense of stability felt almost unreal. Each morning she arrived before sunrise, opening the doors to a place that no longer smelled of worry but of fresh hay and hope. Volunteers returned, new ones joined, and donations began to arrive from people who had heard about the story of a girl who refused to give up on stray animals. Yet despite the calm, her thoughts often wandered back to Logan. He had vanished from the spotlight entirely. His clinic chain continued under new management, but he had not contacted her since the day he handed her the documents. She told herself it was better that way, that he needed time to rebuild his life. Still, every time rain hit the roof, she felt that familiar ache in her chest. One afternoon, while sorting adoption forms, a delivery truck stopped at the gate. The driver handed her a small package with no sender listed, only her name written in neat handwriting. Inside was a silver pendant, shaped like a paw print, attached to a note. "For the one who never stopped believing that every life matters, L." Her eyes filled with tears. The pendant was made from the same silver as her old necklace. She held it tightly, feeling its weight and warmth. That evening, she pinned the pendant above the front desk where everyone could see it. The light from the window reflected off its surface, casting tiny glimmers on the walls. A week later, during an adoption fair hosted at the shelter, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "You hung it up," he said. She turned, her heart skipping a beat. Logan stood there in a simple jacket, looking healthier, calmer, yet humbler than before. "You came back," she said, smiling despite herself. "I had to see if you were still saving the world," he replied with a soft grin. "Not the world," she said, Just my corner of it." They walked together through the rows of animals. Volunteers greeted him kindly. And for the first time, there was no tension, no cameras, no questions. Just two people who had weathered their own storms. When they reached the window where the gray cat sat, the same one that had brought them together, he paused. "She looks different," he said. "She found a home," Nora answered. "Just like you should." He looked at her for a long moment before saying, "I think I just did." The simplicity of his words left her speechless. He reached into his coat pocket and placed something on the counter. It was the original Milo's promise necklace, now repaired and shining. "I believe this belongs to you," he said. "I kept my promise." Nora took it in her hand, her voice barely a whisper. "And you kept your heart." For a moment, neither of them moved. The shelter was quiet except for the soft hum of life all around them, dogs breathing, cats purring, the wind stirring through open windows. Finally, she smiled. Maybe fate was not such a bad matchmaker after all. He laughed quietly. "No, I think it knew exactly what it was doing." Outside, the sky cleared once more, and light poured through the glass, settling gently on the two of them, proof that sometimes, even a mistake can lead you exactly where you were meant to be. Spring came early that year, bringing a burst of color to the city. Evergreen Shelter had become more than a rescue center. It had become a symbol of hope. Children visited on weekends to play with the animals, volunteers painted murals on the walls, and local businesses sponsored adoption drives. Nora could hardly believe how far they had come. Everywhere she looked, she saw the mark of kindness. The shelter's sign now read Milo's Promise Foundation, the name Logan had insisted she use when he signed everything over to her. It felt like a full circle. What began with one lost cat had turned into a second chance for hundreds of lives. Logan had returned to veterinary work quietly. He opened a small clinic near the outskirts of town, focusing on low-cost treatments for rescued animals. He kept his name off the door, letting the work speak for itself. On slow days, he would stop by the shelter, often bringing supplies or new rescue cases. One bright Saturday, Nora was setting up for a community adoption fair when she noticed him arrive with a box in his arms. "Another rescue?" she asked, walking over with a knowing smile. He nodded. 5 kittens left in a parking lot. They are fighters, though." She took the box and glanced up at him. "You know, you could take a day off. And miss this chaos?" he said, laughing. "Not a chance." All day they worked side by side, their laughter blending with the noise of children and barking dogs. By evening, 3 of the kittens had found homes, and the last 2 were asleep in a small basket by the window. As the crowd thinned, Nora leaned against the counter, tired but content. Logan joined her, his voice gentle. "You turned this place into something extraordinary." "We did," she corrected softly. "It would not exist without you." He looked at her for a long moment. "I used to think success was measured in numbers, in buildings, in the next clinic. Now I realize it is measured in lives touched, in moments like this." Nora smiled. "You sound like a man who finally found his peace." "Maybe I found more than that," he said. Before she could respond, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught as he opened it. Inside was a simple silver ring, engraved with tiny paw prints. "I was going to wait for the right time," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "But the truth is, every time I walk into this place, it feels like the right time." "Nora Hayes, will you let me spend the rest of my life rescuing hearts with you?" Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded. "Only if you promise never to stop believing in second chances." He smiled, slipping the ring onto her finger. "That is one promise I will never break." Around them, the animals stirred, as if sensing the moment. The gray cat older now jumped onto the counter and brushed against their hands. They both laughed. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow across the shelter. On the wall behind them hung the silver pendant he had once sent her. The light caught it perfectly, making it shine like a small, steady flame. And for the first time in a long time, both of them knew that this was not the end of their story, but the beginning of everything they had been searching for, proof that love, like rescue, is not about saving the perfect life, but choosing to keep saving, again and again. A year later, the world around them had changed, yet the small shelter on the corner of Evergreen Street remained the heart of everything they had built. The sign above the gate now read Milo's Promise Foundation, 1 year of hope. On that crisp spring morning, the place was filled with laughter, camera flashes, and the warm sound of music. It was the shelter's first anniversary celebration, and people from every part of the city had come to see the place that had saved so many lives. Nora stood near the entrance, greeting guests as the wind lifted her hair. Children ran past her, holding tiny leashes. Volunteers served food and handed out adoption kits. Behind her, a large banner read, "One kindness can change everything." She turned and saw Logan helping a group of kids paint paw prints along the wall. His sleeves were rolled up, a streak of blue paint on his cheek, and that familiar quiet smile on his face. When he noticed her watching, he waved her over. "You are supposed to be the guest of honor," he said. "And you are supposed to be resting," she teased. "Resting does not suit me," he said, handing her a paintbrush. "Come on, sign your mark next to mine." She dipped the brush in yellow paint and added her handprint beside his. When she pulled away, the two prints overlapped perfectly. As the sun began to set, the crowd gathered in front of the main building for a small ceremony. Nora stepped forward to speak, her voice steady but emotional. A year ago, this place almost disappeared. But love and compassion brought it back to life. Every animal here has taught us something about patience, forgiveness, and second chances. And every person who stood beside us proved that kindness is the truest form of courage. Applause filled the air. Logan joined her on stage, his hand finding hers naturally. "What she is not telling you," he said to the crowd, "is that none of this would exist without her. She reminded us that you do not need to be rich to make a difference. You just need a heart willing to care." The audience cheered as he turned back to her. "Now, I have one more thing to say." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, the old silver necklace, the one engraved with Milo's promise. It had been cleaned, restored, and fitted with a new clasp. He fastened it gently around her neck. "This belonged to you before all of this began. I think it should stay with you forever. It started everything, after all." Her eyes glistened. "You kept it safe all this time." "I told you I would," he said softly. "Promises are meant to be kept." The crowd watched as he leaned forward and kissed her forehead, a simple gesture that said everything words could not. Behind them, the shelter lights flickered on one by one, bathing the courtyard in a warm golden glow. The gray cat, older and slower now, brushed against their legs, meowing softly as if giving its blessing. Nora bent down, stroking its fur. "Look at us," she whispered. "We really did it." Logan smiled, slipping his arm around her shoulders. "We rescued them, Nora, but somewhere along the way, they rescued us too." As the music swelled and the sky turned to soft shades of orange and pink, the camera of life seemed to pull back, showing the shelter alive with light, laughter, and second chances. Because in the end, love like rescue is not about how the story starts. It is about the hands that choose to stay, the hearts that choose to heal, and the promise that no one, human or animal, will ever be left behind again.